Hello everyone, welcome to another video. Today we are doing our second installment of some photography analysis from some award-winning artists, and today we are looking at the creative category. So it's a pretty broad category and there's a lot of editing behind the scenes that goes into some of these images, and we're going to be breaking down what a lot of these artists did right to create this successful image and how you guys can replicate a lot of these same techniques in your own work. All right, let's jump right into our first image here. We are looking at a photo taken by Mariola Glazkar, something like that, from Poland. It's a very Sia album-esque photo, if you know who that musical artist is. She's got a lot of this hairstyle look. But yeah, one of the first things I think of when I see this is really trying to figure out how they executed it, what happened behind the scenes to kind of create this image. This is, again, the creative category, so there's a lot more editing, kind of photoshopping allowed for things like this, which makes it that much more fun to kind of figure out, try and guess how they came up with some of these pictures. So initially it could possibly just be accurate with the dog kind of having maybe this like two-sided look to it. But once you start to look closely at some of the elements of the picture, you'll start to realize that this is not the case. For instance, we can begin with the ears here. You can see just like on the left, we've got this just full kind of one-toned ear. And then on the right, it's compared to this white ear, but with this kind of second brown tone sort of in that deep middle part of it. Moving down to the eyes, we can see the eye shape is completely different from these two shapes here. The nose is another piece we can look at. It looks like there's a lot more texture on the left nose here than the right. So yeah, once we can kind of dissect all these little pieces of it, you really start to learn the artist chose to pose this twice and then kind of mask out the two sides of the dog here to kind of come together as one. And the actual masking was done pretty intentionally to be not perfect. We can see the backdrop is obviously split into two to really highlight the contrast being shown down the middle here. But with the dog, it's done with this imperfection line. It kind of has this curve here. We've got all these like pieces of fur that are really climbing over to the edge of each side here. And then even if you really look closely here, you can see a slight head tilt on the dog, which causes, you know, this line to really not be perfect down the middle. And it really makes you feel like it could be realistic because you can see those imperfections come through the picture. Another piece of this is all of the black and white. There's really not much color, which might make you think that it could be better utilized as a full-on black and white picture with, you know, no color showing. But once you start to look at it, you'll see that all of this black and white is framing the only piece of color in the image, the face here, with, you know, these like red lips, and then even just the skin tone really contrasts nicely with the black and white that's everywhere else in the photo. And even like the ears here are framing it. The hair on the top with this straight line it's all framing the color in the middle of the picture here. It's always fun to kind of try and figure out how an artist made an image. I like it a lot. It's a great picture. Okay, on to the second photo here. This is taken by Yi Han in China. And a lot of these creative category photos I'm discovering are really centered around like set design, lighting, these kind of different creative outputs than maybe typical photography. And so there's not necessarily these complicated photography techniques used to break down in a lot of these, at least not that I'm familiar with, but it's really impressive. But at first glance, I remember thinking that it could be, you know, this real life set with the woman kind of acting as the scale of it all. So she's sitting on, you know, this normal size bed, and then all of these furniture pieces are kind of stapled or nailed to the walls, the ceiling, to create this sort of home in a box look. As I started to kind of dissect all these different elements that are positioned in the set, and they really had this kind of miniature feel to them. This woman, you know, was she masked in afterwards? Is she completely fake? Like the face looks really accurate compared to the rest of the body, whereas like the feet maybe look a little more clay wax model figure-esque. But it's really cool to kind of have that the story is told both in the image and then trying to figure out the image as well, which is really fun. The lighting, I think, is really important to these kind of small structure sets and really goes unnoticed a lot of the time. We see the most obvious light source is from, you know, this window on the left that shines on the subject's face, and that helps the viewer really know where to look right away. And the light kind of carries on to the back wall here, illuminating these back pieces. And then there's also lights aside from this one that we just can't see, but that really play a big role in this photo. When you have all of these little pieces and subjects, shadows are really important, and so having different light sources where the light can really bounce and play around all of these objects individually help us feel like it's real. Having different light sources creates this depth and this dynamic image where there's all these layers to it, which is just fitting to the actual photo because there truly are all of these layers with the objects and things like that around the image. Something that helps us as artists demonstrate not creating limits on your creativity. And photography, even though it is its own creative source, it can be used to capture other types of creativity as well. Here we go on to image number 3. This is taken by Kinga Winuk, again from Poland. They're representing today. The color stands out to me a lot with this picture. Obviously the subject has all of this color and draped around it, which we'll dive a bit more into. And it all starts with the backdrop. So a lot of backdrops in photography will be either these true white or true black colors, which just kind of means they're either as white as possible or as black as possible to really create as much contrast with your subject. But this artist did it a little differently. This backdrop is kind of this deep gray, close to black, but not quite. And it really pairs nicely with the features of the horse. So if we look closely, the eye here, it is a pretty deep black, but it maybe is closer to gray. And then really this nose here is this deep gray that is very similar to this backdrop. And so by using a color that brings out features of the subject for the background, it creates kind of this partnership between the two, this relationship, and it makes us feel like it's one big connected image. The coat of the horse obviously is this like deep red, brownish kind of color, and that's sort of the foundation of all of this color that we see in the picture. And then all of these flowers and different pieces that were brought into the image are really intentional. All of this green is added, which in color theory, color harmony works really well with red. So bringing in a green to play nicely with the coat of the horse is really purposeful. And then all of these other colors, kind of the pink, this magenta or like brighter red, and then there's like white, some yellow down here as well. All of these kind of just help as highlights for this deep, rich color of the horse. Even posing the hair purposefully on this side, kind of hiding it on the top, but making it come out and appear on the bottom works really well as an additional highlight to the image. So really well done. I really like this picture, and it's a great example of how to use color properly to not only add color to a scene, but to really emphasize features of a subject. Jumping right into our fourth and final picture here is taken by Angel Rostier, is possibly how you say it, taken in Spain. This is a great example of the longer you look at this picture, the more you'll see. So the composition of this is pretty interesting. You can see that all of, the subjects are in this bottom close to 50% of the picture, which leaves this top 50% as just kind of negative space, blank space. And at first thought, I wonder why not just kind of create more of these subjects into this top part of the image to make it feel that balance. But without having subjects on the top left, it really helps us create this sense of environment. And again, because it's blurred, which is obviously done on purpose, this movement as well. If subjects were up here, it's really easy to sort of get sucked into the people and sort of ignore where they are and how the environment impacts those subjects. Once we zoom in a little bit, we can see that there's reflections on some people, and then on others they're either cut off or they're a lot less, which is an interesting touch. And then even closer than that, we can see that all of the faces have been cut out. There's no specific identity with any of these people. All of their faces have been removed, and then also they're duplicates of each other. Every person that's in this image has a mirror somewhere else, which again is one of those things you just maybe wouldn't see if you're just looking at this quickly. And even though there's all of these little details that make, you know, each person different, what brings this whole image together is each person's shadow. We can notice the shadows just as soon as we notice the people, and it's the similarity between all of them that allows us to kind of combine them into this one big subject in the image. And then the other piece of this photo I really like is the use of black and white. I've talked about this before in other videos. I just made a video on shadows. If you're interested in that, check it out. But using black and white to bring out shadows in your image is really important. And it adds this extra depth, this contrast, and this simplicity to pictures where you can really focus on the shadows and the highlights, because there's not all of this color that's kind of distracting you from what the artist really wants you to look at. Okay, those were all of the photos we're looking at today, all 4 of my selections. If you want to look at some other photos in that batch, feel free to visit the World Photography Organization website. They've got every gallery on there with all the images. I encourage all of you to apply to photography contests around the world. It doesn't have to be this one. It's really good to be vulnerable with your photography, show other people, and sometimes even get critiques back on what could be improved, and maybe even win something along the way. I hope to be going through the other categories of this website. We've gone through architecture and creative now, and so moving on to the next one. I appreciate you watching. Thanks so much for making it to the end, and I'll see you guys next time.